We were always together. That's how everyone saw us. Mason and Cameron, inseparable. Best friends. We'd known each other since before I could remember, our lives intertwined like two threads in a rope, woven tightly, never meant to be pulled apart. But that was before the changes. Before I started noticing things about Cameron that made my stomach twist in ways I couldn't explain. It was a typical afternoon, the sun dipping low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the schoolyard. I sat on the edge of the bleachers, Cameron beside me, both of us quietly watching the rest of the football team practice. The world felt normal, but something in the air felt different, something I couldn't put my finger on. Cameron laughed at something one of the guys shouted from the field, and my heart skipped. It was just his laugh, right? But it wasn't just his laugh. It was the way his eyes sparkled when he laughed, how the sound of it sent a jolt through my chest that made me forget how to breathe. I glanced at him, just a fleeting moment, and something inside me cracked open, spilling out all these thoughts I had tried so hard to ignore. Thoughts about how he looked in the sunlight, how his t-shirt clung to his chest just right, how I knew every inch of his face, but there were still moments when I looked at him and saw something new. Something that made my chest tighten. I turned away quickly, my face heating. "You okay?" Cameron asked, his voice pulling me back to reality. He was looking at me now, his brow furrowed, concern creeping into his features. "Yeah, just tired," I lied, forcing a smile. "Long day." But it wasn't a long day. It was the feeling that had been brewing inside me for weeks, and I was scared. Scared of what it meant. Scared of the fact that I couldn't stop thinking about him. "I'll take you home," Cameron said, nudging my shoulder with his. I barely registered the touch, but the warmth of it lingered long after he pulled his hand away. "Yeah, sure. Thanks," I replied, standing up and brushing off my jeans. We walked side by side, as we always did. But today it felt different. His presence felt heavier, his proximity pulling at something deep inside me. Every step seemed to echo in the hollow space between us, a space that hadn't existed before. What the hell was happening to me? I had known Cameron my entire life. He was my best friend, the one person who understood me better than anyone else. Our bond was unshakable, built on years of shared memories, countless hours of talking about everything and nothing. We were inseparable, a perfect pair. But now something had shifted. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was there, lurking in the space between every word, every glance. It made my stomach tighten and my heart race, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next few days passed in a blur. I tried to act like everything was normal, like I wasn't constantly aware of how Cameron's laughter made my chest ache, or how his touch left me craving more. But the truth was, I couldn't escape it. Every time he was near, every time he said my name, I felt it, the pull, the attraction, the yearning that I couldn't explain. I had tried to bury it beneath our usual jokes and casual conversations, but it was becoming impossible to ignore. I could feel the tension between us, growing stronger with every passing day. There were moments when I would catch him looking at me just a little too long, or when our hands would brush ever so slightly, and something inside me would stir. I wanted to say something, to ask him if he felt it too, but the words never seemed to come out. Instead, I stayed quiet, letting the discomfort settle deep within me. It was late one night when it finally broke me. We were hanging out in my room, the usual routine. A pizza between us, a movie on the TV, but neither of us were really watching. We were talking, as we always did, about everything and nothing. Our hopes for the future, stupid inside jokes, the things we wanted to do after graduation. But as he laughed at something I said, a wave of something sharp and raw rushed through me. It was the kind of feeling that hit me out of nowhere, like a tidal wave crashing over me, pulling me under before I could even process it. The laughter in the room faded into the background as my mind focused on one thing, Cameron. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in weeks. His hair was a little longer than usual, falling just over his eyes. His eyes, the ones I had spent my entire life getting lost in, were dark and warm, a shade of brown that made my pulse quicken. They had always been the eyes of my best friend, but now, in the dim light of my room, they felt like something more. And then, without thinking, without knowing why, I reached out. My fingers brushed his arm, just a slight touch, but it felt like electricity. The air around us seemed to crackle with tension, and I froze, my hand still lingering on his skin, as though it had a mind of its own. Cameron's gaze dropped to where my fingers rested on his arm, and for a long moment, neither of us moved. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, louder than the soft music playing in the background. Time seemed to slow, stretching out between us, as if the universe was holding its breath, waiting for one of us to break the silence. "Cam," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I don't know what's happening to me." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he shifted slightly, and I felt his warmth radiate against me. A silent invitation that sent a wave of heat rushing through my body. His eyes met mine, and there was something there, something that hadn't been there before. It was like we were both standing on the edge of something we couldn't pull away from. Something we had been avoiding, not knowing how to face. "Maze," he said my name slowly, carefully, like he was testing it on his tongue, like it meant something more than it ever had before. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. His voice, my name, the weight of his gaze, it was too much, too overwhelming. I felt my walls crumbling, the carefully constructed barriers I had built around my emotions falling apart with every passing second. And then, just as quickly as it had come, the moment passed. Cameron stood up, breaking the silence with a movement so sudden and sharp it sent a jolt through me. "You want another slice of pizza?" he asked, his voice strangely light, almost too casual. I nodded, though my throat felt tight, and the weight in my chest remained, heavier than ever. The laughter, the ease, the comfort we once shared, nothing felt the same anymore. And yet, I wasn't sure if I wanted it to go back to the way it was. Then it happened a week later. A week of tortured glances and awkward silences. A week where I kept telling myself it was just a phase, just a weird stretch of feelings that didn't make sense. But I couldn't stop thinking about him. And Cameron, he seemed to know something was off. He kept glancing at me like he was waiting for me to say something, to explain the way I was acting, the way I couldn't look him in the eye without feeling my insides twist. It was late again. The house was quiet, my parents were asleep, and Cameron and I were sitting in my room. We were studying, but neither of us were really paying attention to the books in front of us. I kept stealing glances at him, the way his lips moved as he spoke, the way his hand brushed his hair out of his eyes. And then it happened. Cameron reached for his drink, and his hand brushed against mine, just like it had that night on the couch. But this time, I didn't pull away. I didn't look away. Instead, I held his gaze, and for the first time, I saw it, the same confusion, the same longing in his eyes that I had been hiding from myself for so long. Before I knew what was happening, Cameron leaned in. His breath was warm against my cheek, and my heart slammed in my chest. His lips were just inches from mine, and I could feel the pull, that magnetic force that had been building between us for so long. "Maze," he whispered, his voice husky. "Are you sure?" I nodded, my hands trembling as I reached up to close the distance between us. And then, his lips were on mine. It wasn't soft, it wasn't gentle. It was desperate and messy, and everything I had ever wanted and more. I didn't know what was happening or what would happen next, but in that moment, nothing else mattered. All I could focus on was the taste of him, the warmth of his mouth, the way my heart was racing in my chest. When we pulled apart, my head was spinning. I didn't know what to say, how to make sense of it. Cameron smiled softly, his hand resting on my cheek. "I think I've been waiting for that too, Maze." The next few days were a blur of confusion. Cameron and I hadn't talked about the kiss, hadn't discussed what it meant or where we were going from here. Instead, we fell back into our old routine, pretending like nothing had changed, even though everything had. But I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't feel what I felt for him. It was after school, just the two of us sitting in the park, when I finally broke. The words spilled out before I could stop them. "I don't want to just be your best friend, Cameron. I said, my voice tight with emotion. I want more. I want you. Cameron turned to look at me, his face unreadable. For a moment, I thought he would pull away, that he'd laugh it off like it was some silly joke. But instead, he just sat there, looking at me. Maze, he said softly, his voice a mixture of tenderness and hesitation. I've wanted the same thing. But I don't know what this means for us. I don't know what we're supposed to do now. The weeks that followed were filled with uncertainty. Cameron and I had talked, really talked, about everything. About what we felt for each other, about the risks, about how everything could change between us. But in the end, we decided to take the leap. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't always perfect. But every moment with Cameron felt like a new chapter, a fresh start. We weren't just best friends anymore. We were something more. Something that, despite the risks, felt right. And for the first time, I wasn't scared anymore. Because with Cameron by my side, I finally understood what it meant to truly live. To love.